raise your hand if you need the volume up a bit. Thank you. I've got a PowerPoint for you, and I've got my helper in the back. Thank you so much. As Pastor John said, this is a pretty important topic, alcohol and drug awareness. Brought to you by the Council on Alcohol and Addictions of the Finger Lakes. We cover Yates, Schuyler, Seneca, Wayne, and Ontario counties. So if you are in need of any information in your church, schools, community, youth groups, please let us know. We'd love to help you help our youth. So what is alcohol? There are different kinds of alcohol. Ethyl alcohol, ethanol, is the alcohol used in beverages, and it's produced by the fermentation of grapes, grains, and fruits. Fermenting is a chemical process whereby yeast acts on certain ingredients in foods, creating the alcohol. The first drink or so may give a stimulant effect or an up effect where a person feels happy, but alcohol is a depressant, meaning that it eventually slows down vital functions, resulting in slurred speech, unsteady movement, disturbed perceptions, and an inability to react quickly. As for how it affects the mind, it reduces a person's ability to think rationally and it distorts judgment. Alcohol is a factor in the 3 leading causes of death among 15 to 24-year-olds: accidents, homicides, and suicides. According to the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, alcohol is the most commonly used and abused drug. It is popular, socially accepted, and legal. Yet it is the most frequent cause of individual and family pain and suffering. It is our nation's #1 drug problem. So what is a drug? A drug is anything that changes the body's normal functioning. It can be chemical, or it can be a behavior, such as gambling, eating, spending. All drugs have risks, even over-the-counter and prescription drugs when used as directed. The doctor determines if the benefit outweighs the risk for prescription drugs, but the use of any drug can lead to problems and addiction. The short-term effects of alcohol abuse. Here are some problems drugs can cause. Let's take a look at alcohol as it remains the most commonly abused drug in our society, followed closely by tobacco, marijuana, over-the-counter, and prescription drug abuse. Those are some of the many short-term effects of alcohol, including anemia, loss of red blood cells, blackouts. The difference between a blackout and passing out is if someone passes out from too much alcohol, they become unconscious. A blackout is a memory lapse where the drinker can't remember events that occurred while they were under the influence. Some long-term effects of alcohol abuse. Can everybody see those all right? And that's not even a complete list, including coma and death. Cancer has been associated with alcohol abuse, osteoporosis. Alcohol effects on the body. Alcohol damages every area of a person's body and life. That part's kind of tiny, isn't it? Well, you can see that all right. That's a healthy brain versus a substance abuse brain. You can see the difference in the two. That damage may be temporary, it may be permanent. Those are actual scans of a healthy brain, courtesy of the AmenClinics.com. If you go online, you can see some more. Alcohol can damage a brain at any age. As we age, our bodies are less able to metabolize or handle and process the alcohol. Therefore, senior citizens may choose to cut back on alcohol or eliminate drinking altogether. Alcohol is especially harmful to a child and teen's brain because the brain continues to develop until age 25. Any substance use on a developing brain increases the risk of addiction and possible lifelong damage. Adolescent brain development illustrates the brain development through early childhood up to about age 25 to early adulthood. The blue on the last slide indicates on the brain on the last. No? Or maybe hit the down arrow. Yep. The blue brain indicates a fully mature brain. If you look at that little red circle, that's in the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that governs judgment and decision-making functions, and that's the last part of the brain to develop. This explains why teens, who are more prone to participating in risk-taking behavior, are particularly vulnerable to drug abuse, because their brain isn't fully developed yet. A maturing brain on the next slide from back to front. Because the prefrontal cortex is one of the last areas of the brain to mature, adolescents tend to use other areas of their brain, usually the emotional area, when making decisions. So it's really not all their fault. Their brain is still developing. We got to cut them a break. Lots of guidance needed. Next slide, please. Alcohol and other drug use harms your freedom because there's legal consequences, as well as the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, school, job performance, sports, hopes, dreams, goals are all damaged. Opportunities in a person's future. There's some important laws regarding the legal consequences for parents and youth to know. The Alcohol Beverage Control, or ABC law, makes it illegal for those under 21 to purchase or possess alcohol with the intent to consume. That whole law hinges on the word intent, which may or may not be fair, but the law assumes that if someone under 21 is around alcohol or other illegal drugs, illegal alcohol for them because they're under 21, even if that young person is not drinking or not using the substance, if they're there at the party or the gathering, when the police are called, they will have consequences. That may not seem fair, but it's the word intent with this ABC law, because law enforcement thinks that if you're around it long enough, eventually that alcohol is going to find a way into your body, even against your will. There's also a social host law, and it states that it is illegal for anyone to buy or provide alcohol to anyone under 21, providing unless it's their own child, and that is within limited circumstances. I had a parent tell me in the course of one of the classes that he took me for that when his son turned 16 years old, he decided to throw him a keg party because that was his coming out party. So he had beer kegs sitting in the tub, and he figured, well, he's 16, he's reached manhood, so drink up. So a parent for their child only within their home and only within reason. Otherwise, it's considered child endangerment. So if a parent chooses to, with a meal, let their son or daughter have a sip of wine or sip of beer, that's within their parental right and within the law. Those providing alcohol to others who are minors can serve up to 1 year in jail and pay up to a $1,000 fine. There's also civil liability for any damage or injury resulting from underage alcohol use, whether the parent is home or not, whether the parent is aware or not, whether the parent has given their permission or not. So those of you under 21, I urge you, please do not put your parents in this situation. If you know what their rules are about drinking, please respect that. For those who wait till their parents leave for the evening or for the weekend to throw a party, you're really not only putting yourself in harm's way, but you're really putting your parents in harm's way as well. Another law that's important to know is Leandra's Law. That's a New York State law named after 11-year-old Leandra Rosado, who was in a car full of children driven by an adult who chose to drink and drive, crashing the car and killing Leandra. This law was passed in 2009, and it elevates the crime of endangering the life of a child by driving under the influence of alcohol or any drug to a felony, with up to 4 years state prison time, 15 years for injury, and 25 years state prison if a child is killed in that accident. It also mandates every convicted DWI offender to install an ignition interlock on their vehicles so that they cannot drive impaired again. And the youngest victims of all of alcohol and other drug abuse are there you go. Those who haven't had a chance to begin living. When consumed by pregnant mothers, alcohol enters the bloodstream, passes through the placenta, and enters the unborn child. Alcohol is a teratogen, a drug or other substance capable of interfering with the development of a fetus, causing birth defects. Alcohol can damage an unborn child at any stage of pregnancy. Therefore, there is no safe amount of alcohol or safe time during pregnancy to drink. There is a risk of alcohol-related birth defects, including growth deficiencies, facial abnormalities, and damage to the brain and nervous system for life. Damage to an unborn baby by a mother who drinks during pregnancy is called FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and it is the most common preventable cause of developmental disorders in the United States. On September 9th, I don't know if the print's big enough for you to see on the screen, every September, the 9th month, the 9th day, the 9th hour, the 9th minute is International FASD Awareness Bell Concordance Day. People can celebrate it on their own. They can celebrate it within their schools or churches. And what we ask churches to do if they'd like to get involved to raise awareness for FASD prevention is to ring their church bells 9 times on the 9th minute of the 9th day of the 9th hour of the 9th month. And that represents the 9 months of a woman's pregnancy. Alcohol and other drug abuse hardens the family. Substance abuse creates dysfunction, unpredictability, and neglect in a family. It creates unhealthy ways of coping, and children do not receive the nurturing they need to become healthy, confident, happy, productive adults. Family members often take on survival roles. The dependent is the one who depends on alcohol or other drugs. The codependent is usually the spouse who tries to deny or hide the problem by enabling the dependent and protecting him from the consequences of his drinking or drug use. The difference between helping and enabling: helping is doing something for someone that they cannot do on their own. For example, tying a toddler's shoes for them. Enabling is doing something for someone who can and should be doing for themselves. For example, calling the spouse's boss to say he's sick and can't make it to work, when the truth is he's hungover from a night of drinking. Please note when I say him, I refer to any person, male or female. The hero in the family is usually the child who tends to be an overachiever, volunteers, is responsible, needs attention and approval, tends to be nurturing and parental with other children, is disappointed at losing, fear of failure, and is often seen as the teacher's pet at school. The mascot seeks to ease family tension and offers the family comic relief. They are often the class clown at school and tend to be people pleasers to avoid conflict. The rebel or scapegoat acts out and causes trouble, breaks rules, talks back, is irresponsible, and tends to bear the brunt of punishment at home and school. The lost child never complains, is quiet and fades into the background, has few friends, is imaginative, may have low verbal skills, and is often teased or bullied by other children. Now, these roles aren't fixed. The children can change roles depending on the circumstance and the need. But these unhealthy roles, these codependent, dysfunctional roles, are developed out of a need for emotional and maybe physical survival. The next slide shows the 3 C's. As you can see, substance abuse is truly a family disease. The good news is there is hope and there is help for all members of the family. The cycle of abuse can be broken. It's important for those impacted by someone else's substance abuse to remember the 3 C's. I didn't cause this. I can't control this. And I can't cure someone else's drinking or drug use. Well, you can get encouragement and help by talking to someone you trust, getting the facts about drug abuse, and going to support meetings like Al-Anon. These meetings are offered online and in your community. There are resource sheets on the table in the hallway. For those who want to recover from substance abuse, call for help and try AA or Al-Anon meetings or AA or NA meetings. And those sites are on the resource sheet on the table as well. Alcohol and other drug abuse harms every area of an individual's life and the lives of others. So why do people use drugs? According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, research has shown that people generally take drugs to either feel good, for example, sensation seekers or anyone wanting to experiment with feeling high or different, or to feel better. For example, self-medicators or individuals who take drugs in an attempt to cope with difficult problems or situations, including stress, trauma, and symptoms of mental health disorders. People take drugs because they want to change something about their lives. Here are some of the reasons young people have given for taking drugs. To fit in, to escape, to relax, to relieve boredom, to feel more mature, to rebel, to experiment. People use for different reasons. Some people think that drugs are a solution, but eventually the drugs become the problem. Hard as it may be to face challenges, drug use will only complicate and eventually destroy our lives. Why are some people at higher risk for drug abuse and addiction than others? Anyone can develop a problem with alcohol or other drugs. We all have factors in our life that put us at risk for making unhealthy, unsafe choices. But the more risk factors a person has, the greater the chance of developing a problem, especially if there aren't enough protective factors to counterbalance those risks. There are risks in our communities, schools, jobs, families, peers, and even within ourselves. Risk in the community includes availability of drugs. They're easy to get if you want them. The availability of firearms. It's easy to get guns and weapons if you want them. A lot of people hunt. They have weapons in their home. They may not be secured. If someone in the household starts drinking or becomes impaired under any substance and got a hold of that gun in their right thinking, they may not use that. But when our thinking is impaired, we don't make our best, safest choices. Laws and norms may be favorable to a problem. You know, if the people in your community don't seem to have a problem with what's going on, maybe they think that's a rite of passage, like the beer keg in the bathtub. They think it's normal. They might think it's no big deal. Say we did that when we were kids. We drank when they were that age. Media portrayals of violence, alcohol and other drug use. Are you exposed to music, literature, video games, computer, or movies that contain sexual content, violence, or alcohol and other drug use? What are you exposing your mind to? Transitions and mobility. If you or your family move around a lot, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to develop a problem, but it makes it harder for young people if they don't feel stable and they don't feel rooted. Low neighborhood attachment. If you and your family don't spend much time with your neighbors or don't know your neighbors, you may not feel connected. You may feel isolated. That's a risk factor. Extreme poverty in your community makes it harder to get the help and resources that you need. There's also risk in schools and the work environment. These problems can start as a student and carry over into adulthood if there's early antisocial behavior, difficulty getting along with others, peers, teachers, authority figures, academic failure or struggling, if there's low commitment to school, if school isn't that important to you. Those all put you at risk. There's also risk in families. A family history of problem behavior. If you have other family or extended family members who have experienced trouble due to drug use, illegal activity, or mental health issues, that can put you at risk. It doesn't mean you will develop a problem, but if you act on certain behaviors, it could put you at higher risk much quicker. If there are poor family management practices, if parents or guardians don't have much control over children's behavior, or if there's family conflict, tension, arguing, emotional, or even physical conflict among family members, those put us at risk. Parental attitudes and behaviors that are favorable toward the problem behavior. If our parents and adults in our family don't see drinking as a big deal, we may not see it as a big deal. There's also risk within ourselves and our peers. Rebelliousness, friends with problem behaviors, attitudes that are favorable toward the problem behavior. If you and your friends don't see drug use or drinking as a big deal, that's a lot easier to do. If there's an early start or initiation of a problem behavior, for instance, if you had a history of getting into trouble from the time you were quite young, if you started drinking or using when you were quite young, that could lead to further trouble. And there's constitutional factors, health factors, mentally and physically. So what are the warning signs of drug abuse? Signs and symptoms of alcohol or other drug abuse. There's physical and health warning signs. According to the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, the use of drugs is a serious issue and should not be ignored or minimized. We should not just sit back and hope they will go away. If left untreated, use can develop into abuse. Abuse can develop into addiction. As a result, it's important to recognize the signs and symptoms early. If you're worried that a friend or family member might be abusing drugs, here are some of the warning signs to look for.
Are those on some of the material on the table?
Pardon me?
Is that available on some of the material out there?
I can leave this.
Okay.
If you want my notes. Signs and symptoms of alcohol and other drug abuse on the next slide show behavioral warning signs. Behavioral warning signs include drop in attendance or performance, excuses, decreased motivation, complaints from others, unusual, unexplained need for money, financial problems, silent, withdrawn, secretive, suspicious behaviors, sudden change in relationships. Those are all warning signs. Next. These are the psychological warning signs. Change in personality, attitude, mood changes, outbursts, going back and forth between maybe unusual hyperactivity to lethargy or spaced out, fearful, withdrawn, anxious, nervous, maybe even paranoid, depending on the stage. So when does drug abuse become drug addiction? Signs and symptoms of drug addiction. Alcohol and any drug dependence involves all of the symptoms of drug abuse, but also involves another element, physical dependence. Tolerance means that over time you need more drugs to feel the same effects. Do you find that person using more alcohol or drugs than they used before? Do they use more drugs than other people without showing apparent signs of intoxication or impairment? I think it's worth noting here that maybe some of you have heard before that you have a friend or family member that's bragged about being able to hold their liquor, hold their beer. Legally, their BAC or blood alcohol content is still just as high as someone who's had the same amount to drink, who's maybe showing more of the symptoms because they have an increased tolerance. So even if someone hides their impairment well, that still doesn't mean they're not impaired. Another warning sign of addiction is withdrawal. As the effects of the alcohol or other drug wears off, the person may experience withdrawals such as anxiety, jumpiness, shakiness, trembling, sweating, nausea and vomiting, insomnia, depression, irritability, fatigue or loss of appetite, and headaches. Do you find that this person uses drugs to steady their nerves, stop the shakes in the morning? Drug use to relieve or avoid withdrawal symptoms is a sign of addiction. In severe cases, withdrawal from drugs can be life-threatening, such as withdrawal from alcohol. A person should never, who has a drinking problem, should never try to stop drinking cold turkey without medical help. It could kill them. It could involve hallucinations, confusion, seizures, fever, and agitation. These symptoms can be dangerous and should be managed by a physician specifically trained and experienced in dealing with addiction. Another sign of addiction is loss of control. Using more drugs than they wanted to, for longer than they intended to, or despite telling themselves that they wouldn't do it. And the desire to stop but can't. The person has a persistent desire to cut down and stop their drinking or drug use, but all efforts to stop and stay stopped have been unsuccessful. Signs and symptoms of drug addiction: continued neglecting other activities. Are they spending less time on activities that used to be important to them, such as hanging out with family and friends, exercising, pursuing hobbies or other interests? Do drugs take up greater time, energy, and focus? Even when they're not actually drinking or using, are they talking about it or thinking about it or recovering from their last use? They have few, if any, interests, social or community involvement that doesn't revolve around the use of drugs. You may find their friends change, or maybe they start associating more now with other people who drink or use. Continued use despite negative consequences is another sign of addiction. They continue to use drugs or alcohol even though they know it's causing problems. For example, a person may realize that their use is interfering with the ability to do their job, is damaging their marriage, making their problems worse, or causing health problems, but they continue to use. So this is the addiction cycle. What is addiction, and why can't someone just stop? You've probably all heard that before. Well, he knows it's causing problems. He knows he's losing friends. He knows it's messing up relationships in his job. He knows he's had DWIs before. Why don't they just stop? According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, it's not that easy. For one thing, the brain has been hijacked. Everyday simple pleasures in life are no longer enjoyable because the drug is much stronger and powerful and rewarding than the normal pleasures in life. So the drug takes control of our thinking and behavior. This causes brain disease. Research now shows that addiction is medically considered a brain disease. because the abused chemical actually alters the structure and the function of the brain, as proven by brain scans. These changes may be long-lasting or even permanent. There is no cure. For example, if someone had an illness like diabetes, you wouldn't say to them, so just wake up tomorrow and don't be a diabetic anymore. You don't need that insulin. Once the disease of addiction has developed, there is no cure and it will not go away. But it can be treated and it can be managed. And the way it is managed is we go into recovery, we stop using not only our drug of choice, but any chemical, because any chemical can reactivate the addiction and eventually lead us back to our drug of choice. So if you hear someone say who's an alcoholic, well, I don't drink alcohol anymore. Now I, maybe abuse my painkillers or do something else. It's still chemical abuse, and it's still going to reactivate that addiction in the brain. So the only way to manage or treat addiction is by not feeding it and keeping it in hibernation. So for those who can safely and legally drink, what is moderation? Drinking in moderation is considered having no more than 2 standard servings of alcohol a day for men. Moderation is defined as no more than 1 standard serving of alcohol a day for women. So what is a standard serving of alcohol? There it is. Each of those drinks is equal in alcohol content. That's why it's important to measure and to use a standard serving for those who can drink safely and moderately. 12 ounces of a can or bottle, a standard size of beer, has the same amount of alcohol as about a 4 to 5 ounce glass of wine, which is equal to about 1 ounce, 1 shot of 80 proof liquor, any type of liquor, gin, vodka, whiskey. Each of those is equal in alcohol content. So if a person who's used to drinking a couple of bottles of beer with his meal at night decides instead of that he's going to drink a couple of 12-ounce glasses of hard liquor, whether they're watered down or not, the alcohol content isn't reduced. Anyone who would try to drink a 12-ounce glass of hard liquor would probably put themselves into an overdose, alcohol overdose, and probably death. So it's very important to know what a standard serving size of alcohol is. The next chart shows BAC, blood alcohol content. Alcohol and other drugs affect each of us differently. Even small amounts of alcohol can quickly raise a person's blood alcohol content, BAC, and cause impairment. At just a 0.01, a 0.00 is no alcohol in your system. So at just a 0.01 BAC level, a person may not even be consciously aware of it, but they are already impaired. It may not show, but they're already impaired. Just 1 standard serving of alcohol can put a person at a 0.02 or higher BAC, depending on your risk factors. 1 standard serving of alcohol increases the risk of drinking and driving death by 1.4 times. A person with a 0.05 BAC, when you get to 0.08, if you're legally old enough to drink, if you get to a 0.08, you're considered illegal. It's a DWI, and in some cases a 0.07. But even at a 0.05, you might think you're okay to drink. But that 0.05 BAC has 11 times the risk of a drinking driving fatality than someone who has no alcohol in their system. Therefore, it is not safe to drive after drinking any amount of alcohol. This BAC chart shows it a little bit more clearly. And this chart shows signs of alcohol poisoning. Binge drinking is drinking as much as you can, as fast as you can, and it seems to be on the rise among young people. It's very dangerous drinking. Binge drinking is defined as 4 drinks in a row for a woman, 5 drinks in a row for a man. It rapidly increases the BAC because the liver can only metabolize 1 standard serving per hour. So that's why the definition of moderate drinking for those who can drink in moderation is 1 a day for a woman, no more than 2 a day for a man. So this binge drinking is very dangerous. It quickly causes a toxic, poisonous buildup of alcohol in the blood, leading to alcohol overdose and possible death. Even if a person throws up, which is one of the first signs of intoxication, and it's actually a serious warning sign. And most of us have seen it before, that someone had so much to drink that they got sick and didn't think anything of it. That's actually a warning sign. Even if a person throws up, they only eliminate the alcohol that's in their stomach. They don't eliminate the alcohol that's already been absorbed into their bloodstream and is circulating throughout their entire body. So if you see any of these warning signs, and if you want to put the rest of them up, call 911 immediately. You could save that person's life. And all the myths that you've heard about trying to sober a person up quick, black coffee, cold shower, let them walk it off, let them sleep it off, none of that works. Because the liver can only metabolize, the adult liver can only metabolize and process 1 serving of alcohol per hour. If you're drinking more than that, faster than that, your liver can't keep up and you're building up that that toxin. So how do we protect ourselves? We can protect against unsafe, unhealthy, risky behaviors. They can be taught, practiced, encouraged within the community, school, family, peers, and within ourselves by having self-respect. Self-respect helps kids and adults feel confident. They want to take care of themselves, make responsible decisions regarding their health and safety, and that reduces the pressure to use drugs. Practicing resistance skills makes it easier to refuse drugs when you're confronted with them. Avoiding people and places where drug use and drinking occur. Delaying gratification, using self-control. If we can wait, if we can say no. It gives us time to think. Oftentimes we feel like we're caught in the moment and have to make a quick decision, or people might feel that social pressure or peer pressure. If we just give ourselves time to step back and think for a moment, that could be what saves us. Being resilient, being flexible helps us to make decisions for ourselves, even in challenging situations. It helps us make the best of difficult situations. Talk to an adult you trust with experience. Get help. Social skills help us to develop healthy relationships with self and others and to create a sense of belonging. That reduces the drug risk. Having goals, plans, helps us to realize how our choices, such as drug use, can damage or destroy our hopes and dreams. Having healthy family relationships provides respect, support, and unconditional love that encourages positive decision-making. Having positive role models shows that we can achieve our goals without drugs. Having stress and anger management skills allows us to deal with powerful emotions and life's challenges in a positive, healthy way that strengthen us and our relationships. Being involved in positive activities, helping others. When we help others, we help ourselves. Respect for authorities and laws help prevent us from being in unsafe, illegal situations in the first place. So this is the health pyramid. Parents, it's important to talk early and talk often with your kids. Parents have more influence over their children than friends, music, TV, the internet, and celebrities combined.
Yes.
You may not think you do. You may not think they listen, but they do.
They do.
Kids who learn a lot about the risks of drugs and alcohol from their parents are up to 50% less likely to use than those who don't hear that message from their parents. Help your teens stay safe and make healthy choices by talking, listening, and being involved in your child's everyday life. Have a clear message about smoking, alcohol, and other drugs, and what your rules are and what the consequences are. Make sure they're reasonable, make sure they're loving limits, but make sure they're firm. This is the Monitoring the Future 2012 study. This shows trends in most commonly abused drugs. You can get this online. Since 1975, Monitoring the Future has conducted an annual survey in U.S. schools for the National Institute on Drug Abuse. In the last 20 years, this survey shows that alcohol use among teens has gone from 50% to approximately 40%, which is still too high. Tobacco use among teens nationwide has gone from 30% to about 20%, which is still too high. And illegal drug use among teens has risen from 15% to 25%. So that tells me they've just changed their drug of choice. Marijuana use is number one at 35%. Marijuana use. And a big part of that is the perception, the availability. Hanging out with friends who use, they can get their hands on it if they want to. It's easier not to say no. There's no reason not to say no. It's all natural. Grows out in nature. Why not? Well, there's a lot of things that are natural that you find out in the woods that I probably wouldn't want to stick in my body. Poison ivy, poison oak. Animal feces is all natural. Do you really want to stick that in your body?
Good point.
So when you have a conversation with your teens like that, you get them to laugh a little bit, you get them to think a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, just because it grows in nature doesn't mean it's really good for me. Let's think about this.
We live in a fallen world.
A study released earlier this year showed that people who used marijuana in their teens and continued through adulthood showed a significant drop in IQ between the ages of 13 and 38. After marijuana, prescription and over-the-counter medications account for most of the top drugs abused by 12th graders in this past year. Parents, grandparents, please keep track of your medication if you're on over-the-counter or prescription medication. Know how many pills you should have left. Keep them locked up. Keep them secured and out of harm's way. I'm not sure in Yates County. I know in Schuyler County at our sheriff's department in the lobby they have a medication drop box. No questions asked. Just remove your personal information and take the loose pack or the bottle or whatever it is that you no longer have any use for and just drop it in. It looks like a blue metal post office box. And just get it out of harm's way, out of your home if you no longer need it. There's also another alarming trend going on. Maybe you've heard of synthetic drugs. Sometimes they're called designer drugs because they're made or designed to create a certain feeling or effect. These are being used by students in alarming numbers. These man-made synthetic drugs include bath salts, spice, also known as K2 or crazy clown, crocodile. Crocodile is referred to as the flesh-eating zombie drug. And the difference between that and meth is meth will eat you from the inside out. Crocodile will eat you from the outside in. But either way, it's not pretty. If you get online and you Google crocodile, those are actual pictures. They have not been doctored or photoshopped. It started in Russia, came to the United States as a cheaper alternative to heroin. People started on maybe abusing painkillers, opiates, and then they couldn't get their hands on them anymore. It was too hard to evade the law, so then they went to heroin use, which was cheaper and easier to get. Then when the heroin became too expensive or hard to get, they went to this synthetic drug called crocodile, which is cheap and easy to make in any home, or on the go, just like meth is. And a person who starts using crocodile has a lifespan of about 1.5 years. It will literally eat you alive. Synthetic drugs are an emerging class of drugs containing one or more compounds that mimic the effects of other drugs, such as marijuana, methamphetamine, and heroin. People use synthetics to get high by swallowing, snorting, or injecting. Because these drugs are relatively new, much is still unknown about how they affect the brain and the body. They have been linked to an alarming surge in visits to emergency departments and poison control centers due to cardiac and psychiatric symptoms, such as violence towards self and others, and a split with reality that may be permanent. On the resource sheet that's out on the table, I have the poison control number. It wouldn't hurt for all of you to maybe have that in your phone on hand at 1-800-222-1222. Real easy to remember. It could save a life. 1-800-222-1222. And I've often found this is a national poison control center, I've often found with them that they are on top of these emergency trends. So if you call and you see that someone's, displaying some symptoms and you're not sure what's going on, you call the poison control center and tell them. Chances are they can narrow it down very quickly and tell you what to do. And then 911 along with that. At the local level, and it's not just you guys in Yates County, we're facing this in Schuyler County and all over, meth making and meth use continues to be a problem according to police reports. Every once in a while you see it in the news. According to the 2010 to 2013 Yates County Health Assessment, it's called the CHA, Community Health Assessment. That's online as well, if you want to search that. Yates County Community Health Assessment. That's pretty interesting. It shows you what's going on with our youth and our adults in the community. And what this shows is that tobacco use rate is at 30% for current smokers in Steuben and Yates County. Yates County tobacco use is quite a bit higher than the state average, but there does seem to be evidence of improvement. Yates County death rates for lung cancer is still above the state and regional averages, probably due to the tobacco use. And along with tobacco use, alcohol and other drug abuse are still number 1 and number 2 of the top 10 concerns in Yates County, according to your community members. Yates is slightly higher than the state risk rate for binge drinking and heavy drinking. Death rates due to cirrhosis of the liver are also higher in Yates County compared to other areas of the state. So we've got our work cut out for us. The problems are there. We need to be able to talk about them. We need to be able to come together. And there is help, and there is help out there. The resources are there. We need to just reach out and be willing to use them. So the resource page, that's also on the sheet that I mentioned out on the table. Please help yourself to anything on that table. If I can be of any assistance, please call. Our information is out there as well, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.